Hi everyone, I'm Spencer Campbell of Gila RPGs, and this is the second Rune tutorial how to play video in the series that's here to teach you how Rune combat works. In the previous video, you learned the kind of core rules of combat, the basics of how the game works in terms of rolling dice to assign them to various values, action sets, the 5 steps of the round. This second scenario here is the second tutorial scenario that you can find in the playtest documents, and this introduces multiple enemies. So this is going to be very similar to the previous video that we saw before, but you will see a couple of variations in terms of how things work when we have multiple enemies. And so if a lot of this sounds very familiar to what you saw in the previous video, good, that's intentional. It shows you that the rules are still holding up the same. We're just changing a few things, or just keeping in mind, really, a couple things as we have multiple enemies. So if you've done the second tutorial, or you're interested in doing the second tutorial, this is a great video to learn how multiple enemies in combat work in Rune. Same setup as we had before here. We have our 4x4 grid where I am this green knight token, and now we have 2 enemy soldiers. And these aren't the training soldiers that we saw from before. These are just soldiers. There's a couple of variations in terms of what they can do compared to the training soldier. And also notably, they have less health. Each of them has 4 HP or health, which means they die a little bit faster, but there's 2 of them that I have to deal with. Let's talk about how the combat works when there are multiple enemies. Well, how does a round work? It starts by determining what the enemies are going to do. That's step 1. How does that work when you have multiple enemies? In this case, we roll a die for each enemy. We're going to see what each enemy is going to be doing during their turn. And so that means that enemies can have different action sets that they're doing, even if they're the same enemy type. So let me roll 2d6 and see what my 2 soldiers are going to do. And then I'll walk you through sort of what their plans are in this turn. So let me actually copy this red die so I have 2 of them. Here's what I rolled. I rolled a 5 and I rolled a 1. That's what's going on here for my 2 soldiers. So I'll put that 5 there, that 1 there, just so we can track what they're doing. We know what the enemies are going to do. Let's walk through what they are going to do before we move to the other steps. The soldier on the left here is got a 5. What does a 5 mean? They're going to move 1 space away from me. They're going to deal 1 harm if possible, and they're going to block 1 harm. We'll talk about what it means to move away and how that works when we get to the second step. What is the first soldier going to do? They're going to move closer to me, and they're going to try and hurt me. They're going to move 1 closer and deal 2 harm. Okay, I know what the enemies are going to do. I've seen them telegraph their motives or their intents. What's the next step? It's moving the enemies. All right, so how does moving multiple enemies work? Well, you as the player get to kind of decide what order you move the enemies. Should I move this soldier on the left first or the soldier on the right? Oftentimes it doesn't matter, but sometimes there are instances where 2 soldiers or 2 enemies are moving in the same path where they might try to occupy the same space. It is okay for them to occupy the same space. Remember, any 2 characters can be in the same space as one another. But sometimes you'll find that an enemy is trying to move into a space where they can't move into it because there's already 2 people there, or they can't move closer or further away because of various other factors on the grid. When that happens, you as the player just need to make a judgment call on whether or not you should move the enemy, if they should move one way or another. And that's sort of the freedom you have in this being a solo RPG. You can kind of tinker a little bit with this enemy movement AI as necessary. So I'm going to take a look here and see what my enemies are going to do. I'll start with the soldier on the left. They're going to move 1 away. Now, away from me, what does that mean? Well, it could mean further down the grid, which would be a further space away from me. But it also could be, in this case, moving to the left, because that is still a further distance. So because the soldier can't move any further down, they're going to move 1 space left. I know that if I get close to this soldier, they're going to deal 1 harm and block 1 harm. But it's pretty unlikely this round because they're all the way down in the corner and I'm all the way up at the top. What is the other soldier going to do? They're going to move 1 space closer, and I know they're going to deal 2 harm if I'm in range of them, which, as a reminder for our soldiers here, the range is either in the same space or an adjacent space. So that's step 2. Step 3 is to see what I'm going to do. So I've got my 2d6 here. That's my stamina pool for the tutorial scenarios. Let's roll it up. I got a 4 and a 5. So let's see what I can do with a 4 and a 5. Well, in either instances, if I put either of them here in my shield, I'm blocking 1 harm and I'm moving 1 space. So, okay, I can move either one there. let's see if it matters which one I move over. What can I do with the 4 or 5 with the longsword? Actually, it's the same option over here. They both do the same thing for me. They move 1 and they deal 2 harm. So in this instance, it doesn't matter which die I apply to which thing. It's going to do the same outcome regardless. Could I sum these dice together? It'd make a 9. 9 is way past the limits what this gear can handle. So no, I can't unfortunately use the summing rule in this instance. So what am I going to do? I'll just put them here like this. So I'll put the 4 here. I'll put the 5 over the longsword. I know what I'm going to do. Now it's step 4. It's time for the player to move. Am I moving? What can I move? I can move in this instance 1 space, and I can move an additional space. I can move 2 spaces this turn if I want. All right, that would put me right on top of this enemy soldier. Do I want to be on top of them? Not necessarily. That means we're both hurting each other a lot, and I want to kind of maybe play this one a little bit slower just because there's 2 enemies. So I'm going to just move 1 of those spaces closer. Now it's time for harm to be dealt. Well, are the soldiers dealing harm? This one is trying to deal harm, but it's swinging at the spaces next to it and nobody's there. This soldier is going to do 2 harm, actually. They're going to deal 2 harm to me. Am I blocking any harm? In this instance, I'm blocking 1 harm. So the 2 damage that the enemy soldier was going to do to me gets reduced to 1, so I have 9 HP. Now, I deal harm back to them. In this case, I'm dealing 2 harm. And are they blocking? No, the enemy soldier is not doing any kind of blocking. So I'm going to, zoomed in a little bit there. I'm going to reduce their HP here to 2. So they're halfway dead already. And that's the end of the round. It's time to do it all over again from the start. So I'm going to move my dice back over here just so that I can move them when I need them later on. Let's start with step 1. What are the enemy soldiers going to do? Let's roll it again. Here's my left soldier. Here's my right soldier. I've got a 2 and a 5 here for my soldiers. So my left soldier is going to do a 2, and my right soldier, in this case, is going to do a 5. I know what they're going to do. Let's see if they're going to be doing any kind of movement. Soldier 2 is going to move 1 space closer. Now, I have my choice here. I can move that soldier up a space here. That's closer to me. Or I can move them to the right. That's also closer. Either one is fine. So as a player, I get to decide. I'm just going to move it 1 closer because to me that just feels closer, even though they're both going to be helping the soldier get closer to me. Now this soldier, they're going to move 1 space away from me. So I'm going to move them down a space. I'm going to have them move away from me so that there's a gap between us. I need to get closer to the soldier if I want. I'm starting to see that they're starting to group up here, which, you know, could be a bad thing for me if they end up in a position where they are flanking me and attacking me from both sides. I also know that they're going to deal some harm and block a little bit this turn, so it's time to figure out what I want to do. Step 3. Let's roll my stamina die. I rolled a 1 and a 2. That's pretty horrible, actually. That is a pretty bad roll for me. What can I do with a 1 and a 2? This is the first instance where I've rolled a die that can't be used. A 1 isn't useful in a longsword or a shield, which means this die is either a waste or I'm going to need to do that summing thing, which allows me to do something a little bit more interesting. What can I do with a 2? Well, it's not good for a shield, and it's really not good for a longsword. I won't have any movement. I'll just be swinging in midair, which means I'm going to sum these 2 things together. I'm going to actually combine them together as a 3, and I'll move them over here to my longsword. What does that mean? I get to move 1 and deal 2 harm. Okay, so I've summed my dice together, forgoing the idea of using the shield this turn and just going to try and move in and kill this soldier. Speaking of, it's time for me to move. Step 4. I get to move 1 space, so I am going to move towards that soldier that was running away from me. And now it's step 5. Let's deal harm to each other. This soldier here is going to deal 2 harm to empty air. They're not going to hurt their friend, and I'm not standing here. So this soldier is continuing to not hurt me. This soldier, on the other hand, is going to deal 1 harm and block 1 harm. Well, I'm not blocking anything right now, so I'm going to just take that harm. I'm down to 8 right now. I'm going to deal harm to them. In this instance, I'm dealing 2 harm, but they get to block 1. So they're going to reduce that harm by 1. And so the enemy soldier, is down to their last point of health. Okay, I wish I had killed them, but they had that block up, and so now I'm gonna have to just make sure that I can kill that one quickly before they try and flank me and really mess me up. We're back to step 1, which means let's move our dice back over here so that we can refer to them later on. as we roll our dice. We start by figuring out what our enemy soldiers are going to do. Let's roll our left first and then our right. I got a 2 and a 1, which means they're going to do the same thing as one another this turn. Both of them are going to try and move one step closer to me and deal 2 harm. It's not great because I'm already kind of next to them. So they're going to really get on top of me and do a lot of harm. So I'm hoping that I can get some good blocks or at least wipe one of them out so that, yeah, I take the damage, but then it's just me versus one of them and it'll be kind of an easier fight after that. Speaking of, it's time to move and see where they go. So they're each going to move one step closer. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to just move this one closer first just because it's obvious. They're going to move right on top of me if they can. What is this one going to do? They could move here or they could move here. I'm going to move them up here just because, I don't know, why not? It feels interesting to see them kind of flanking from this side. So I moved them one step closer. Let's see what I'm going to be able to do this turn. And I really hope that I roll better than the 2 and 1 that I got last time. So here's my 2d6 for my stamina pool. I got a 2 and a 1 again. This is a disaster for me right now. I got literally the exact same roll. So we know already that the 1's not doing me much good. The 2's really not doing me too much good. I might as well sum these together and move. Because if I don't move, I'm going to get hit by both enemies. And I'm in one of their spaces right now. So it would be really bad for me. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to sum these dice together. And I'm going to count on a 3 for my longsword. So now I get to move. I get to move one space. I think I'm going to want to move. I don't want to stay here because if I do, I'm going to take a lot of damage from the enemies. I would take 3 from this one because they get an additional harm and 2 from this one. That's 5 HP. That's way too much harm for me to be taking. So I'm going to move away. I'm going to move one space so that I'm only taking damage from one of them this turn. And, it's going to at least reduce the effect a little bit. Now it's time for us to deal harm to each other. This soldier, again, is swinging in a spot where they were going to hit me, but they're not going to hit me anymore. So they don't do anything. This soldier is going to deal 2 harm to me, and I'm not blocking anything, which means I'm down to 6 health. Okay, am I going to hurt them? Yes, I get to deal 2 harm to them, and they're not blocking, which means I do kill off this soldier. They had 1 health left. I've killed them off. It's hard so far. I mean, it's a little bit more challenging, you can see. It also doesn't help that I'm not rolling particularly well, but that's part of the experience. Part of the experience is the puzzle of figuring out what are you going to do with the dice that you roll. All right, so let's reset these dice. We don't need this red die anymore. We just need the 1 for our last soldier. At this point, I have a little over half my health left. Just the 1 enemy. I think I can be a little bit more aggressive. I can move in, just try and kill them. Now, in the full version of RUNE, maybe I wouldn't want to do that, because maybe I don't get to heal as much between combat. Maybe I'd still want to play cautious. We're not sure yet. We're not into that phase of RUNE just yet. So let's play this out. Back to step 1. What is the enemy soldier going to do? I rolled a 6. The enemy soldier is going to sit still. If we look over at their action set here, they're not going anywhere. In fact, they're going to stay where they are, and they're going to deal 3 harm if I get within range of them. That's half of my remaining health, so if I do decide to get close to them, it's better be worth it. So we move the enemy soldier next. That's step 2. Are they moving? No. So we're done with step 2. Step 3, what am I going to do? Here's my stamina pool. I rolled a 3 and a 4. Okay, that's a little better than I had last time. What can I do with a 3 and a 4? Well, a 3 doesn't do me any good with the shield, so I'm not going to do that. And if I sum them, it's a 7, so I can't sum them. So this 3 is going over to the longsword. I know that. So I'm going to move that 3 over to the longsword, knowing I get to move 1 and deal 2 harm. I might as well put this shield here so that I can move 1 additional if I want, and at least block some of that incoming harm. I know I'm going to take a bunch of harm from the soldier, but I do want to kill it. So I'm going to take some of that harm and just try and kill it as fast as I can. So what do I get to do? I get to move twice if I want. It's risky for me to do that. If I move twice, I could be in the same space as the enemy, which means I'm going to deal 3 harm to it, but it's going to deal 4 harm to me. That feels pretty risky at this point to do, but sure, why not? This is a weird Souls-like playtest, I'm going to just move on top of them. I'm going to use both of these moves and just see how it goes. The next thing that we do is we deal harm to each other. Is the soldier hurting me? You better believe they are. They're going to deal 3 harm plus 1, which makes 4. I'm blocking 1 of it, so I'm going to take 3 harm in this instance. I'm down to 3 health left. Now I'm going to hurt them. In this case, I'm dealing 2 harm plus 1, so that brings it to 3. Are they blocking? No, they don't have any blocks either, which means they're down to 1 health left. Okay, soldier's got 1 hit left, and I've got 3 health left. I'm hoping that I should be able to kill them off on this next turn and maybe not die, or at least not take any more harm. That'd be really nice. So let's reset our dice and probably go through our last round of this combat. Okay, so let's start with step 1, which is what does the enemy soldier do? We roll. They got a 5, which means they are going to move away from me, hurt me if I follow them, and they're going to block a little. So they're doing some sort of like evasive maneuver. They're throwing their shield up here. What am I going to do in this instance? Well, first of all, before I do anything, the enemy soldier moves. They move 1 away. 1 away at this point could be any direction. It could be left, up, down, right. Right just feels better because there's more space over there. Up feels good too, so I'm just going to move them to the right just because, I don't know, it feels good to me. Now it is time to see what I'm going to do. Let's roll my 2 stamina die and figure out what I'm going to do. 2 and a 3, not a particularly strong roll. Let's see what I can do with a 2 and a 3. Okay, so what does a 2 allow me to do? Deal 1 harm. If I stay where I am and I deal 1 harm, it's actually not going to do anything because they're blocking 1 harm, which means I need to deal at least 2 harm to this soldier if I'm going to kill them. So this 2 with the longsword, not doing me much good. What does the 3 do? It doesn't do anything for the shield, but it does allow me to move 1 and deal 2 harm with the longsword. I can also sum them to make a 5, but that's the same result for the longsword in this case, so the sum is the same as if I were to just add the 3 over here and just not use the 2. Either one is the same outcome. It doesn't really matter in this instance. So I'm going to put the 3 over here, and I'm going to finish this fight. The next step is to move me. Am I going to move? No. In this instance, I don't really feel like I need to move on top of them. I have the necessary damage to take them out. I don't need to be on top of them and take more harm myself. So yeah, let's just stay put. Now we deal our harm to each other. I'm dealing 2 harm to them, which they're going to reduce by 1. So they are dropped to 0 health. But they're also hurting me. They're dealing 1 harm and I don't have any blocks. Now, even though I've killed the enemy, we deal our harm to each other at the same time. So it's not as if that I killed the enemy and I've stopped them or prevented them from hurting me. We're in this together at the same time, which means I'm going to take the 1 harm from them. I'm not blocking anything, so I'm down to 2 health. And they're going to take the 2 harm, minus 1 from their block, from me, which is enough to kill them. So, that leaves us at the end of tutorial scenario 2 with 2 health. I managed to kill these 2 soldiers, and now you've seen how RUNE works with multiple enemies. The rules are all still the same as we saw in the previous video. There's just a couple of variations in terms of how things work based off of moving our enemies around, occupying the same space, limitations in occupying, and all of that. So hopefully you have a better understanding of now about how RUNE combat works with multiple enemies. If you want to try this out, go grab the tutorial playtest materials and try out scenario 2. You now know how it plays out. Maybe it'll play out a little bit differently for you. Maybe you'll kill those soldiers much easier, or maybe they'll get you. Let me know how it goes. If you want a link to all of the stuff, including where to learn more about RUNE or the materials themselves, it's in the description below. I will see you in a future video where I'll show you more features of RUNE. Have a good one. Bye.